Good morning. I don't know if you guys will believe me or not, but you can check your calendar because I'm telling you the truth. We're only 3 weeks away from Easter. That's crazy, right? I'm pretty sure Christmas was like 45 minutes ago. We are coming up on Easter quick, and so I just want to encourage you guys today to use these next few weeks. Be really intentional. Look for opportunities to invite people to join us for Easter Sunday at Crosspoint. I challenge you to that. I encourage you in that, not because it's just like, well, let's get a lot of people here for Easter. I encourage you in that because we've read studies. There have been studies done that show that people are more than twice as likely to accept an invitation to Christmas or Easter as any other Sunday of the year. And I'm just going to be honest with you. If I could have people here for one Sunday and they were going to get to hear one thing from us, I would want them to hear about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so I want to encourage you guys as you interact with your neighbors, as you interact with people at work, as you go to your kids' events, like look for opportunities to invite people. And so we have all kinds of resources out in the lobby that you can load up on and utilize. But guys, it takes us being willing to step out of our comfort zone and to say to somebody, hey, would you come with me on Easter? Would you come sit with me? Would your family want to join my family? Do you guys have plans on Easter? We're going to Crosspoint. We'd love it if you came with us and invite them. There's a reality that many of you that are sitting in this room, somebody invited you. Right? Somebody invited you to come and join them, and maybe for you, it was just the guilt of like, well, I guess I should go to church. Probably it's Christmas or it's Easter, right? And so I'll go because I'm supposed to. Maybe for you, it was just sounded like as good of a thing to do as any. Maybe for you, it was like, well, I have kids and there's a cool glow-in-the-dark egg hunt, and so I'll go just for that. But regardless of what got you in the door, there are so many of you in this room that it is your story that since you showed up expecting to slide in and slide out, God's been working, right? And you have a relationship with a community of believers, and you have a relationship with your Savior because somebody was willing to invite you. Be willing to invite people. Be willing to step out of your comfort zone in that area. Take that leap of faith and invite them in to what God is doing. Today, we are continuing this series, Hidden Hand. We're taking a look at the story of Esther. I shared with you guys last week, we called this Hidden Hand because God is never directly talked about, mentioned in the whole book of Esther. And yet, as you read through this story, he's clearly at work, right? And so it's not as much this like visible, obvious miracle kind of moment as it is his hidden hand at work through this story in a series of coincidences that are absolutely not coincidences, right? Where we get to see God at work and his faithfulness. And so last week we started off talking about King Xerxes, right? That he is ruling over Persia, which is this epically massive empire, right? It covers what they would have called at that time just the world. It was the whole known world to them, this Persian empire encompasses. And so this empire is being ruled over by Xerxes. He is very, very, very wealthy, obnoxiously wealthy, right? We get a description of his palace in chapter 1 where they tell us that the floors have fine jewels on them. The floors, guys, all right? Jewels, that's crazy. Right, he is so very wealthy, and then we read that at the end of a 6-month party, he tries to bring his wife in to show her off, and she says no, and he says, you're not the queen anymore, right? And so she makes him look bad. He says, you're not queen of Persia anymore, and exiles her, and then starts this really gross process, if you read between the lines, of looking for a new queen. They just go gather up all the young virgins that are pretty in the kingdom, and whichever one pleases him the most, he picks his queen, and it's Esther. And that's our title character, right? This is Esther. And so Esther is Jewish, living in a foreign land. She's not living in her homeland. She's living in a foreign land, and the Jews are not looked upon favorably. We know this because her cousin Mordecai tells her, you should not let anybody know you are Jewish. Keep that a secret. Right? And so she does. She keeps that a secret. She hides that from everyone, and she becomes queen of Persia. And that's where we left off last week, in this place where she's become queen, and we're not really sure why at that point in the story. Right? We're not sure if this is just because she's so pretty that she got this position, or if God is doing something here where he has placed her in this position for a specific reason. And so I want to keep diving into this story. We're going to pick it up in chapter 3, verse 1, all right? Sometime later, King Xerxes promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha. I keep trying to do that one right, but Hammedatha, the Agagite, over all the other nobles, making him the most powerful official in the empire. All the king's officials would bow down before Haman to show him respect whenever he passed by, for so the king had commanded. But Mordecai refused to bow down or show him respect. So Haman, he's our bad guy. He's our villain. He's evil. And he gets promoted, this evil man, to a very high-level position. He's now number 2 in the empire. He is over all of the other nobles. In fact, if he walks by them, the king has said that they are to bow down and show him honor just because he's walking by. And for the most part, people do this, except for Mordecai. And Mordecai won't do it. He won't bow down to Haman, and we're never explicitly told why, although we believe it's because Mordecai recognizes that Haman is evil, and he's not willing to bow down to this evil man. And so Mordecai starts doing this, and the people around him notice, right? They start to pick up on, like, Mordecai, what are you doing, man? They come to him, they ask him, Mordecai, why won't you bow down before Haman? Why? He doesn't directly answer them, he just says he's not willing to do it. So they try to convince him, but he will not bow down before Haman. And so they tattle. Seriously. Haman doesn't really notice this. There's a group of people that come to him and they're like, dude, Mordecai won't bow down before you. Ridiculous, right? So they go and they tattle on Mordecai that he is refusing to bow down before this evil man, and Haman is not thrilled, right? Verse 5, when Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down or show him respect, he was filled with rage. He had learned of Mordecai's nationality, so he decided it was not enough to lay hands on Mordecai alone. I love that it says lay hands. It takes me right to like a YouTube video, right? Like, I'm going to lay hands on you. Just me, I guess. Instead, he looked for a way to destroy all the Jews throughout the empire of Xerxes. Now, we talked about the empire of Xerxes is the known world at this point. So all the Jews in the empire, pretty much all the Jews. So in the month of April, during the 12th year of King Xerxes' reign, lots were cast in Haman's presence. The lots were called Purim, to determine the best day and month to take action. And the day selected was March 7th, nearly a year later. When Haman approached King Xerxes and said, there is a certain race of people scattered through all the provinces of your empire who keep themselves separate from everyone else. Their laws are different from those of any other people, and they refuse to obey the laws of the king. So it is not in the king's interest to let them live. If it please the king, issue a decree that they be destroyed. And I will give 10,000 large sacks of silver to the government administrators to be deposited in the royal treasury. Hey, if it makes you happy, issue a decree that they all get killed. And if you do that, I'll pay a lot of money. The king agreed, confirming his decision by removing his signet ring from his finger and giving it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. The king said, the money and the people are both yours to do with as you see fit. So the king actually refuses the bribe here, which would be good normally to refuse a bribe, but he refuses a bribe that was to allow Haman to commit genocide and says, you don't need to pay me to commit genocide. You can do that if you want to, right? This is messed up. And it really escalates quickly, right? This goes from Mordecai and Haman have an issue, right? Mordecai's like, I won't bow down to you. You're super evil. And Haman's response to that is, cool, I will kill everyone of your ethnicity in the known world. All of them. This means the people back in Jerusalem, the people rebuilding the temple, you want to know where they live? They live in the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire is so expansive that this means all Jews everywhere, they're under attack. So this goes from a one-on-one problem to the entire Jewish race, the entire people group here. They're at risk of being wiped off the face of the earth. I mean, that escalated quickly, right? Have any of you guys ever had a problem that it starts out small, but somewhere like really fast, you're like, how did that get so big? Like, how did that get so big? How did we get there that fast, right? Yesterday in my house, some family was over, and my daughter Allie came walking by. I'm sitting in my chair, and she just picked up a pillow and chucked it at my face and yelled, "Pillow fight." It's like, that's awesome, okay? So like, I'm in, right? Like, we're having a pillow fight. Tyler's running around. Everybody's throwing pillows at everybody. Super fun. About 30, 40 seconds into the pillow fight, I turn, and Tyler has a pair of scissors. And we disarmed him. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, about 20 seconds after he's disarmed, I'm sitting there being like, yes! And Abby's looking at me like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I needed a sermon illustration tomorrow about things escalating really quickly. And guys, our God is faithful. He provides. And I might have problems. But this gets real bad real fast. And there is big danger here. And so Mordecai is obviously, he is distraught at this news, right? That all of his people are at risk. And so he begins to mourn. He tears his clothes. He puts on a burlap sack and goes just outside the palace gates. He would not have been allowed to enter into the palace compound with this burlap sack on. Somebody who was in mourning would not have been allowed in. And so he remains just outside the gates and he publicly mourns. He weeps. He is full of this like deep, deep sorrow. And Esther eventually hears about this, right? Word makes it to her that her cousin is sitting outside of the gates, weeping loudly, mourning loudly, and she tries to send him some clothes, right, to get out of this burlap sack. And like, Mordecai, here's a new outfit. But that doesn't help. He refuses. He's weeping and weeping, and she's trying to figure out from a distance what she can do. And so finally she sends down her attendant to see what's going on. Like, Mordecai, what is happening? Why are you mourning? What has happened that you are so upset? And so Mordecai fills in Esther's attendant, her servant, right, on what's happening, on the risk that they face. He gives all the details of the story of how we got here. He even tells her exactly how much money Haman offered to the king in exchange for the right to kill the Jewish people. And so he explains all of this, and the attendant goes back to Esther and communicates everything that's happening. And now Esther is faced with a decision here, right? Like, she has found herself in a tough spot. Because she's now aware that her people outside of the palace, those people down there, those people who live far away, they're at risk. But the reality of her situation in this moment is that she's queen. She has a team of people who it's their full-time job to take care of her. She lives in a palace that is so beautiful that there are precious stones on the floor. If some of you guys did the reading in your group this week, you guys were drawn again to the reality that they had couches of gold and silver. I don't even know what that means fully. That's ridiculous. She is living the life. She has more than she could have ever dreamed of. Every need and desire that she has is met. This is the dream. She's queen of Persia. And so while they have great need, probably in this moment, she doesn't really feel like she does. And so she hears about this, but she really doesn't plan to respond at first. And so she sends her attendant back down. We'll read this in chapter 4, verse 10. Then Esther told Hathach to go back and relay this message to Mordecai. All of the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king in his inner court without being invited is doomed to die, unless the king holds out his golden scepter. And the king has not called for me to come to him for 30 days. So Hathach gave Esther's message to Mordecai. Like, Mordecai, I hear that things are tough. I hear that this is really scary for you. But everybody knows. All of his officials, people way out in the provinces, they even know that anybody who would just approach the king without being invited, they're breaking the law. And the punishment for violating this law is that he can kill us unless he decides to extend his golden scepter. Like, Mordecai, you're asking me to risk everything. You're asking me to risk my position. You're asking me to risk my privilege. You are asking me to risk everything to go before him and ask him to change a law, to change a ruling that he has sent out to the far reaches of the empire, right? Last week we talked about the fact that he had messengers that would carry out his instructions to the far reaches of the empire. And you're going to ask me to go before him and ask him to change something that he has said? There's a deeper layer here, right? That the last queen, she made King Xerxes look stupid. He called for her. She didn't come. It was embarrassing. If he has to change this law or recant this in some way, that's not going to look good for him. So she recognizes the risk here. So she says to Mordecai, he hasn't invited me for like a month. There's nothing I can do. And then Mordecai replies in verse 13 here with probably the most famous part of this whole story, right? Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all the other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place. But you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this. Look, Esther, if you do nothing, if you sit there, I think we're all going to die. I think you and our whole family, I think we are going to die. Now, here's the thing that I love about what he says here, right? If you do nothing, I think we're going to die, but I know the stories, right? Mordecai knew the stories. He was a Jewish man. He would have grown up hearing about their people being enslaved in Egypt and God delivering them, about how they were in the desert and needed food, and God invented delivery, right? With manna and quail. He would have heard stories about when their people were facing against a giant who was so big that there was no way anyone could defeat him, and then a little shepherd boy walked out there, and David defeated Goliath. He would have known story after story after story of the faithfulness of God showing up for the Jewish people, of the reality that God had delivered them so many times before, and he looks at their situation and says, look, if you do nothing, deliverance is going to come from somewhere. But what if? What if it's not a coincidence that you're queen? What if this isn't just a random situation that has happened here? What if you were made queen for such a time as this? What if the whole reason that you are where you are is for this moment? I think too often in our lives, we just kind of soldier through. We look at the situation that we're in and we figure out from our human perspective, like I got here because X, Y, Z, right? And I think there's a reality that each of us in our situations, we have our version of this that we live out. And I want you to try to make this really personal today. Right? I want to ask you, what is your such a time as this? What is the situation that you find yourself in, the season that you find yourself in, that it's easy to just look at and be like, well, I'm here. I'll evaluate it from the world's perspective. I'll respond to this from the world's perspective. When maybe God has put you there for such a time as this. God has given you that position, that authority, this season of your life for such a time as this. Some of you in this room, there are people who call you boss. Maybe they don't call you boss to your face. But you're the boss, right? You might not be the big boss, or you might be the big boss, but there are people who call you boss. And there's a weight to that, right? There's a lot to manage in your role at work, and it's really easy to just think about work and think about all the different personalities you have to deal with and think about all the responsibilities and to think about, man, I got to make sure that we're hitting all the marks and we got to do all these things, and work can so easily just be work. When there's a reality that you have significant influence, and you can choose. Am I going to respond the way that the world would expect me to respond? Am I going to be a boss that runs filters through how it affects the bottom line? Am I going to make decisions based purely on that? Or am I going to be the type of leader who says, look, I'm here and I have influence in the lives of other people. And so how I talk to them, how I lead them, how I model my life is an opportunity that God has given me. And maybe I'm not just in this position so I can make enough money so that my family can live comfortably. Maybe I am here for such a time as this. Maybe I'm here because that new employee who's really struggling needs somebody to take them under their wing, to care for them. Some of you are in a phase of life where you think about all the interactions of work and it feels like this a little bit of a distant memory. Some of you are in like the stay-at-home mom phase of life. And there's a lot to that. My wife Abby is currently in the stay-at-home mom phase of life, and I am so grateful that she's able to do that. It's a big deal to us. We value that really, really greatly, that she's able to pour into our kids during these early years. Big deal, big responsibility. I also know from hearing the stories over and over again that after the day of being at home with the kids all day and wondering at 9:30 a.m., how do they still have words left, right? Like, how could they have talked this much, right? You guys that have been a stay-at-home parent, like you guys have lived this, right? Moms, you know that moment where you think to yourself, why did I teach them to talk? Right? Like, why did I do that? What was I thinking? Right? And it can be exhausting, and it can be all those things. I also think there's a beautiful reality in that season that you are living out a time where the people that are with you in that, the people who are living out a similar phase of life to you, they are recognizing their need for community in a way that they never have before. And you have an opportunity to invite them into the greatest community that has ever been known, right? You have an opportunity to invite them into real, authentic community where they get what they really need. There's a group of people who love them and care about them and point them to Jesus. And maybe you're not just in this season to be in this season. Maybe you're in this season because you have a unique opportunity to reach people with the gospel that will affect multiple generations. Maybe you are single right now, and you think about all those family stages of life, and you're like, man, I can't wait to get there. That's going to be awesome. And you have learned to view your singleness as this burden you have to plow through, that eventually you'll get done with this season of life and you'll get to the really good stuff, right? And I want to be transparent here. I've never been a stay-at-home mom. Also, I got married at 21. So I don't know what you're going through. I don't. What I do know is that in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul actually advises people that, hey, if you're able to, just stay single. Because when you are single, you have the opportunity to serve God and know God and serve other people in a way that you just don't in marriage and as a parent. And so I'm not up here saying like, God doesn't want you to ever find someone to live your life. That's not what I'm saying to you. But what I am saying to you is stop looking at this season of your life as this horrible punishment and recognize that you have a unique season of your life where you can serve in a unique way, and you need to look at your life from the perspective of, okay, God, what do you have for me? Where have you placed me right now for such a time as this? What are you calling me to today? I mean, we're in Southwest Florida, guys. So I've given all these family situations and being single and all this stuff, and the reality is a bunch of you guys are like, I remember that. But you moved here because you're done. You're done with work, right? You're not from here. You got to a point in the life where you were like, you know what? Here we go. Time to move to Florida. I told him I was going to do it. And you started with 1 month, and then 2 months, and then 6 months, and now you just live here, right? And you're in a unique phase of life, right? You're in the phase of life where you get up in the morning when you want to, or when your bladder says you have to, right? And you get up in the morning, and you're facing big problems, like where you're going to eat dinner, and if you got that tea time you wanted. Here's the thing, you worked really hard for this season of life, and it's really easy from our world's perspective to lean into, I worked really hard to get here, I'm gonna enjoy this, and I don't want you to not enjoy this season of your life, right? Joy is a fruit of the Spirit. But do you think maybe God blessed you with the abundance necessary for you to retire, not just so that you could ride it out in the comfort and warm weather of Florida, but so that you would have the opportunity and margin to serve people and to pour into the next generation in a way that you couldn't if you were punching a clock from 9 to 5? And that God has placed you here in this city, in this time, in a city that's full of young families who are trying to figure out life and trying to figure out meaning and value and purpose, and that He's placed you here for such a time as this. To say to the next generation, building my wealth was not the most important thing in my life. Following Jesus is. And guys, the reality is all of you live out situations every day where you can say, well, I'm just here. Or you can look at it like Mordecai looks at Esther's situation, and you can say, maybe, just maybe, God's put me here for a reason. Maybe, just maybe, I'm here for such a time as this. Well, let's read Esther's response here, the end of chapter 4. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. I love that. I think it's important to note. They're communicating back and forth through her attendant, right? Like, I've always pictured this, Mordecai and Esther face to face having this conversation. Like, Mordecai is sending this message back to Esther, this plea for her to act, right? And he is sending this back to her like hoping, please say it the way I said it, right? Like, but she sends this reply, go and gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same, and then, though it is against the law, I will go in to see the king. If I must die, I must die. So Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. So how does she respond to this, right? Well, one, she says yes. And she recognizes the risk. I think this is maybe my favorite thing Esther ever says. Like, this is so bold, right? That she here says, look, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. You're right, Mordecai. I'm willing to risk everything here. She said, go fast. Go fast for me. And the only reason we're ever given for people fasting in Scripture is for them to draw near to God, right? And so while God is not explicitly named in this story, we see here Mordecai saying, look, maybe you were made queen for such a time as this. Maybe God has you here, right, for such a time as this. And we see Esther saying, look, if I'm going to do this, we need to try to draw near. And so I want to close today very simply. If as I challenged you about living out your for such a time as this, there was something that came to mind for you that you sat there and thought, but that's big and scary. I want to say to you, our God's big enough. And so lean into him. Like, follow Esther's example here. And say, I feel like you're calling me to this, God. I don't feel like I can do this on my own, and so I'm going to lean into you. I'm going to try to draw near to you and pursue him. Draw near to him. Trust him in the midst of the big and scary. Because I believe that God has us here in this time, in this city, on purpose. That this is not just another coincidence, but that our God is at move. Our God is on the move. Let me pray for us. Father God, I thank you so much, Lord, that you are faithful and kind. God, I thank you for the story of Esther. God, I thank you for her willingness to risk it all here. God, I thank you for Mordecai's words. Father, I pray that we will be convicted by those, God. Father, that you will make it so clear to us what you are calling us to. Father, that we will run our lives through that filter of how we can serve you each day, of why you have placed us where you have placed us, Father. And Father, give us courage. Give us courage to live life the way Esther is right here, to say that we are willing to risk it all for you. I pray all this in Jesus' name.